Welcome back to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club and weekly podcast where we play games and brew good conversation together. I'm your host, Jenny Wyndham.
And I'm Joel Thomas.
And can we just talk about how Cyber City has the world's best theme song? I'm not even going to make like a creative intro.
It's incredible. I wrote it down. There are multiple points in this chapter. I was just like, this music is incredible. What is happening? It was like, tasty.
Yes. For folks who may not know what we're talking about, every month we pick a game, we play it together, and this month we are playing Chapter 1 and 2 of Deltarune. Last week we talked about Chapter 1. This week we're talking about Chapter 2, and next Saturday, December 21st, yep, I'm looking at the calendar, is our community hangout where we're going to just get into full detail about both of the chapters and our theories for what the future chapters have in hold and in store for us. We're going to talk full spoilers, full thoughts and details on Chapter 2. But as always, before we do that, we like to ease into the conversation with a little bit of an appetizer, a little bit of a snack at the pastry case, where we do a grab bag of topics from the industry, what's been going on in our lives, and other things we've just been enjoying.
Well, I don't know about you, but for this pastry case, I'm feeling full, Jenny. I'm feeling very full.
Yeah, no snacking here. I feel like we are truly, this is like the pastry buffet at this point. So good.
This is the trolley is coming down the train, and we have taken the lot of the sweets.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, who have not been hanging out on Brandon Sanderson's Wind and Truth Watch, this is your Wind and Truth Watch update. That is the new subtitle of the podcast, Geeks and Grounds, the Wind and Truth. Jenny's holding up the book.
Have the book for everyone listening. Yes.
It is a full tome. I think you described it as like thicker than the dictionary with pages thinner than the dictionary.
Yeah. It's so good. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Because we have been, this like Geeks and Grounds, the video game discussion club / Sanderson podcast really has been the last few months. Like both of us have been reading through all of Sanderson's works just to like be ready for Wind and Truth. How are you feeling? We've had this book for less than a week. What's going through your mind?
I'm audiobooking because audiobook reading is reading, and
Yes.
I'm loving it. Let me just say this, like we've been doing our homework, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like the student who studied exactly the right things, who showed up on the day of the test, and it's like, oh, I know number 1 because I did this reading, and I know number 2 because I did this reading. Like it is like every chapter, every page almost, something happens that it's like, oh my God, he is connecting these things right now and I can see it. And it feels like the ultimate payoff. Like that's my feeling. How about you?
Yes. Yeah, no, it's been so much fun because like I'll text you and just be like, oh my God. And like we're not even saying anything because also both of us like, so for context, I'm ebook reading this, but I also bought the physical version just for my library. But I'm doing this on my Kobo e-reader, and like I don't know where Joel is. And so I'll just text Joel and be like, what the heck? And Joel will text back, right? And we don't even have to say what we're talking about because it really could apply to any page that we have read thus far or listened to thus far. I'm having a blast. One of the things we talked about that I really appreciated because, okay, if you are reading book 5 of the Stormlight Archive, you are invested. You don't need the like, and here's what happened in the last episode recap that I think a lot of books, when I read fantasy especially, like that is what happens with a lot of books is you get this like really kind of awkward recapping that will happen. And while I think that's great for just memory's sake, I think what I appreciated most is that Brandon Sanderson doesn't really do that in this. Like he just kind of jumps right into the action with very few exceptions. You know, he clarifies a few things, but he just assumes you know the characters, you know what's happening, and he is just trusting the reader that you have made the investment to like read the other books and you know what's going on. And that for me has been so rewarding and appreciated because we don't have time on exposition and like setting the scene anymore. We have to like get into what's going to happen in this world.
No, we have 10 days.
We have
don't
10
have
days.
Time. That is a really great point, and I'm trying to imagine, like, the opening of like your Harry Potter books, where it's like every chapter one is basically exactly the same to remind you that this kid lives in a cupboard or whatever.
Right.
And like, if he had done that in this book and been like, here's this character doing this thing, and then like author's note, like, don't forget this is what happened last time, like, this book would be twice as long because so much stuff is happening. It's
literally incredible. What he probably, the only thing he could do would be like asterisk, read The Way of Kings.
Actually, that would be appreciated. I bet someone's done that. Well, I need to look online and be like, who's tracking through all the like Easter eggs and like cross references here?
Yeah, I bet you the Brandon Sanderson wiki is like the community run wiki is so extensive.
It's great.
I went on to look, and this was like maybe 30 minutes after the book had like officially launched, and I was like, oh, I need to look up this name really fast because I need to like remember where it is, and it already had like, be careful, there are Wind and Truth spoilers, and I'm like, we've had this book for 30 minutes. What?
I had that exact same experience. I was like, oh, something happened in the prologue and the character's name is referenced. Like, hold on a second.
Yep.
What's type, what's going on? And the wiki was there for me. It was ready.
Yeah. It's incredible. So yeah, it's just been an absolute joy. Honestly, I was hoping, I was like, this book is so huge, I'm sure it's going to take me all the way through the end of the year to read it. I genuinely think I will be done with it by next weekend, or maybe even by the end of this coming weekend. Like, with the progress I've been making, it's just too good. I can't put it down.
I'm in the shower, I'm listening, I'm cleaning, I'm listening, I'm cooking, I'm listening, I'm talking to people I care about and know and love, and I'm still listening to the audiobook.
You're listening right now, actually.
I'm listening. I mean, I'm not even like fully engaging with this podcast, actually. Y'all see the headphones? You don't know what's piping in here.
Exactly. I don't blame you. Yeah, it's been awesome. Do you have like, I guess, because we don't want to spoil it for anyone who may be reading it and not where we're at, but like, I guess, do you have a favorite aspect or thing that stood out to you? Like, for me, it was not having all the exposition.
Yeah, I think in the last book, which hopefully has been out long enough that I can spoil just a little bit, like, you learn a lot more about the character Relaine and the Relaine storyline in this and the relationships that he's developing. I just find incredibly compelling. Like, I'm kind of on the point of tears reading some of the, like, there's a lot more romantic elements in this book has been my feeling, and like some of them are like really meaningful, and so that to me has been a really great experience.
Yeah. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree, and that's all I will say on that.
Great.
Anything else that you've been getting into ahead of the holidays? I feel like we're getting close to like Game of the Year discussions, finishing out movies that you want to watch from this year. What else are you getting into?
Well, I'll just give a quick plug for the new Star Wars show, The Skeleton Crew, which is like a kid's story. Kids are the main leads in the show, and like, it's really scratching that like Steven Spielberg itch from back in the day, like the Goonies, Hook. Like, it feels good, so would recommend so far. But I had a really tragic realization this weekend. I went to go see one of the big theaters here in town was showing The Holiday, the old like rom-com Christmas movie.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And I realized that I think a large part of my personality has been built by merging Jack Black, Jude Law, and Cameron Diaz into one person. Like, Jack Black's goofy, like, sing-along, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Jude Law's, like, hypersensitive, I'm a bit of a weepa, like, I cry at everything kind of thing. And then Cameron Diaz's anxiety. I think I've just taken all three of those, and, like, that is who I am. So that was a stark realization for me this weekend.
Oh, my goodness. Now I'm curious. If I watched The Holiday, okay, but was that like, is it one of your favorite like holiday movies? Like, is this
it's one of my least favorite holiday movies, and
That's
I was
so
just
funny. Oh my!
But I've seen it like a handful of times, and when it first came out, I saw it, and I was like, I don't really like this. And now, apparently, unconsciously, I was like, oh no, like,
is it because it hits too close to home?
Yeah, maybe that's. Oh, you know what? Maybe that was it all along.
Yeah, you're like, I see too much of myself.
I see too much of myself in this.
That's so funny. I haven't
Mm,
seen The Holiday, I think, since it's come out. So, gosh, when did that come out? Like the 2000s?
2006, I think.
I'm
Yeah.
so old now. Okay, sorry. Let me dust off my bones really fast.
Yeah, apologies.
I'll have to rewatch it and report back. See
I
if I
should
can.
ask you,
Hmm.
what's going on with your Netflix Christmas, your annual Netflix Christmas movie watch? Are we getting into that at all this year? Are you
I
watching Hot
am.
Frosty? What's going
Oh
on?
my, Hot Frosty is on the list. I have not started, admittedly, because I am waiting to go on my holiday break just to like have
Yeah.
essentially a good old binge session where I have a bunch of snacks around me and I just watch holiday trash movie after holiday trash movie. I'm very excited. It looks like there's like another Lindsay Lohan sort of holiday movie on Netflix. Yeah, there's Hot Frosty, which I was like, damn, they really just laid it all out there. Um, and yeah, there are a few others that have like cropped up, so I just keep liking them and like adding them to my list, and I will report back in the new year with the best of the worst.
Perfect.
Uh, yeah, I'm so excited. For folks who don't know, my one of my holiday traditions is watching basically the Netflix equivalent of the Hallmark Christmas movies. They're all bad. And shallow and formulaic, and I eat it up. So I cannot wait.
Bring back the Christmas Prince. That's what I'm saying.
Oh my gosh, truly. It's like that should just be ongoing forever. Like we should get a Christmas Prince every year. Um
That's the gift. That's the only gift I truly want. It's the
it's the
meaning of the
gift that
season.
should keep giving, honestly. Oh my gosh. But yeah, it's weird. I think we haven't decorated or anything for the holidays yet just cuz we actually have our basement renovation happening,
Nice.
which is great. Today was the first day of like breaking everything down. So like
Cool.
I'm working and it sounds like the house is collapsing underneath me, but it's okay. But yeah, it's been really exciting. But we haven't had time to like decorate for the holidays or anything
Mhm.
yet. So I think this weekend probably will be our like get the tree, put on a little Christmas music and start getting in the spirit of things.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for some joy during these dark days. That's for sure.
Yeah. Are you getting like your own Christmas tree, setting up decorations? Like are you gonna do all that stuff?
I'm gonna spend about 2 full weeks out in North Carolina with my brother and sister-in-law. So I
Oh,
instead of decorating here, I'm gonna decorate with them and do
that'll be sweet.
the Christmas life out with fam. So it'll be good.
That'll be really nice.
Yeah.
Um, and last week you talked about Wicked.
And
You were right. Like it was so I literally again like 10 seconds in the music begins you're just panning, it's like panning on the ground, it's not even anything beautiful. My eyes, everything starts to get blurry. And then basically throughout the rest of that 2 hour and 40-minute runtime, I'm either choked up or actively crying or gasping because my breath is being taken away by how good this dang movie is. If oh man, yeah, we need to go see it again.
you know what I feel like not enough people are talking about?
Hmm.
How flawless Michelle Yeoh looks, acts,
Thank
behaves.
you. I was gonna post about it because I was like, every single one of Madame Morrible's fits is impeccable. Like, I want to be her for Halloween.
That's actually great. That's
Yeah,
fantastic. That's a great
that
idea.
clap when she's like, "Poof, poof," and turns around and then just like walks down the hallway. I was like, oh, finish me. Like, so
Yep.
good.
I totally agree. And I mean, Madame Marvel doesn't have that much singing to do just in the story in general, but like
Mhm.
the sincerity that she portrays, like Michelle Yeoh is just an all-time great
Yeah.
actress, and I feel like she does not get enough recognition personally. So,
Honestly, like she is truly one of the greats. And to see her, especially after Everything Everywhere, like I've
mm,
seen her crop up in more and more projects. I hope she continues to crop up in more and more projects and get more lead roles because, I mean, Everything Everywhere is still like one of my favorite
best movies
movies
ever
of all
made.
time.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And yeah, seeing her in this singing was just really cool. And I thought she held it together. Like people,
Yeah.
I think people were like, oh, I don't know, she's not really a singer. You know, you've got like Cynthia and Ariana. And I'm like, I thought she did a great job because
Yeah.
Morrible, like you said, not meant to be like a superstar singer, just conveys plot through some
Yeah.
tunes, you know? And yeah, it was so good.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I want to shout out the sets and the choreography. I think
Ugh.
that for me, I don't like the fact that a lot of, especially, okay, I talk a lot about how I don't really enjoy Marvel. Or superhero movie genre, I guess, because a lot of the superhero movie genre tends to lean on CG to the point of it
Totally.
feeling not real. And
Mm-hmm.
so the stakes don't feel high. What I loved about Wicked is that like the stakes are high in a very different way, but it felt very real and tangible because the sets
The sets were
mostly seem to be
incredible.
actually made. Like they
Oh,
definitely use some CG in
yeah.
there, but like I was really astounded by the set design of this show and the fact that it seemed like they were actually walking around, running
Mm-hmm.
around, like
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And then the choreo, the camera like let the choreo breathe so you could actually see it, and the choreo was great. And they took one of my least favorite songs and made it actually really interesting to watch, I think, which is the One Short Day in the Emerald City.
Yes.
I usually don't like that song. It's the bathroom break for me mentally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the way that the choreographer infused so many street styles and the costuming and just like everything they did with that piece, I was like, you have redeemed this number for me in a way that I did not expect. So
I totally agree. Actually, you know what it reminded me a lot of? The choreography style and the filming of the choreography reminded me a lot of the recent Matilda musical that's on
mm-hmm.
Netflix. Like
Yeah.
a lot of that type of performance felt very like it felt like they learned some lessons from that maybe and incorporated some
Mm-hmm.
of that styling into Wicked.
Yeah,
Maybe I could
I
be wrong
I
about that.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's really spot on. Um yeah, cuz so much of what I hate about movie musicals a lot of the time is I think because they have the opportunity to make a lot of artistic cuts and decisions, you lose a lot of what makes the choreography fun and interesting to watch in a musical. And so I think with Matilda and with this, they trusted the choreography to be able to like tell the story in a way that I
Mm-hmm.
just really appreciated, especially coming from like the dance mentality. I thought it was really cool.
Oh, I think I will. Let's cross reference. I'll make a plug here. I think I probably talked about this last year, knowing me. But if you're in the mood for a musical and you're in the mood for holiday and you're in the mood for great choreo,
Hmm.
Jingle Jangle on Netflix is
Yeah,
so good. I think we watched it together the first
we
time I
did.
saw it.
Yep.
It's an annual watch for me. It's incredible. Would highly recommend. You gotta get after it.
I 100% agree. I remember being at your house and watching that. It was so much fun. And I remember being like, okay, we're going to put on this movie and it'll be like a cute
In the
little holiday
background or
thing. Like,
whatever.
yeah. And all of us were like totally entranced by this film.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
100%.
that's a good, I forgot about Jingle Jangle. Yeah, that's a good one.
So what else? Anything else going on this week that we need to be chatting about?
Right now, normally there isn't really a lot of releases in December at this point. Because of so many showcases cropping up and
Hmm.
shadow drops, I will probably just talk about and post about the releases in the newsletter, because as of tomorrow, from the state of recording, and the next day, there will genuinely be like 6 different showcases happening.
'Tis the
um,
season.
Tis the season. Women-led games,
Hmm.
Latin American game showcase, wholesome snack, Day of the Devs, the Game Awards. Like, yeah, there's so many showcases happening. I know we're gonna have shadow drops and release date announcements, and so all of that will be in the newsletter because there's going to be a lot, and we have a game that we need to talk about right now.
Yes.
Yes. Again, just as a reminder, as we move into this month's brew, Deltarune, we're focusing on chapter 2 today.
Mhm.
This is a game that is not yet finished. So when we're theorizing for chapter 3, which in theory is supposed to come out next year. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Q1 next year. I feel like we'll probably get it springtime, like maybe associated with like a March, April Nintendo Direct. So maybe that's Q2 technically, but
that'd be cool.
We're focusing on chapter 2. We will probably, I will say, just as a little humble pie here, I was like, oh, I'm sure you don't really need to know about Undertale, and at least I think you can have an appreciation of this game without Undertale.
Yeah, I think so.
But I also feel like even in playing chapter 2, more of your understanding, if you've played Undertale, if you have that experience and understanding, the depth to which you can theorize and understand this game becomes significantly greater. So I would say, again, you can play this without Undertale. I still wholeheartedly believe that. I think it's a great game without Undertale, but I think everyone should play Undertale. Like if you're liking this, play Undertale, because it will change the way you see this game for sure.
We're gonna have to get into that because I've only played Undertale once, and I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, and so
Yep.
I know that stuff was going over my head. So I'm gonna be leaning on your lore for this, I think, in a strong way.
Well, and I guess that's a great place to start, perhaps, as we begin our spoiler discussion of chapter 2. As someone who you've played Undertale, but like it's not something in your current, like more recent memory, how did you feel like your experience with chapter 2 of Deltarune felt? Like, what did that look like?
I'll be honest, it was mostly like, oh, I remember that person being a thing, or I remember that place being a thing, and I remember that item being a thing, and that's it. Like I have no recollection of the specifics of any of that. So yeah, like I'm eager to like see some of the dots that you're connecting there so that I can maybe get a deeper experience from the
But
game.
do you feel like when you played chapter 2, do you feel like you understood generally what was happening and you enjoy, like, or I don't know, what did you enjoy? What did you, like, overview? How did you feel about chapter 2?
Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of get my negative criticism up front, so that we can kind of dig into, like, I think there's a lot of really good about this. My criticism is that it is a mirror, a very close mirror to chapter 1, and because of that, I don't think we needed as much gameplay time as this game had in it, and it was just like, why are we still doing like the cars stoplight puzzle here? It's like, I get what we're doing. The story is not being enriched by this. And so for my only negative critique at this point is like, because it is so similar to chapter 1, I don't think it needed to be as long as it was. Like they could have fast tracked some of the gameplay and let us just like, okay, like we understand like the shape of this story, so let's focus more on that than like the gameplay elements, which felt a little like, why am I still doing this? That's my criticism, I think.
I can see that. Yeah, I think there were points in time when I felt a little bit of that as well, where I'm just like, okay, but like, let's get to the next step of the plot. Like, I don't want to do this again.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like necessarily, it's not as egregious as I think is like a AAA open world game.
Oh, I totally agree.
It's nothing to that degree, but I think because especially we just played chapter 1 and it was so streamlined, I think it can feel like, all right, but like, I thought this was like, there's a point where, I think Noelle even says, like, I think we're almost out of here. And in my head, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll have like another hour of gameplay ish, to finish out this area and have the boss. But then it's actually like maybe another 2 hours. So it's not egregious, but it's enough to make you sort of feel a little of that lag in expectation.
Yeah, I think, yes, I think so. And it's just like, I thought some of the reveals and surprises that happen in this part of the game makes it a story worth telling. I'm very engaged by what is happening in this world.
Yeah.
It's just like, I didn't need all of the, like, there's like a lot of like, what's the fat to trim in between. It's like, I don't know that I needed any of that. So
yeah,
I think that's my criticism. But like, yeah, like maybe we talk a little bit about the overarching structure of the narrative.
Yes. So what's really interesting about, and here, let me get my Steam Deck because I was playing this and admittedly decided, and this is actually a great little like game journal check-in. I was like, I just kind of want to play this for just enjoyment and I don't want to take notes because I just
Mm.
like this world so much. So
Oh,
I ended up
nice.
just doing screenshots and not not taking notes on this one. Because I was like, I just want to play it because I'm excited. So, what's super interesting about this one is that when we start, we basically have this moment where it's like, what what is that knife? Kris, oh my god, no. And it fades to white. And because of the cliffhanger we got left with in chapter 1, where
Mm-hmm.
Kris had torn out their heart, they had a knife, and you're just like, what is going on? What darkness is this? You're thinking something absolutely horrible happened. But what turns out is you actually wake up the next morning and Toriel is in Kris's room. The heart's not in the birdcage anymore, so something happened there. And Toriel's like, Kris, did you eat all this pie? Is this your knife in the tin or something like that? Isn't that what? Or did
That
you
is
have?
not how I interpreted that scene at all.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
what happened is exactly what you described. But
Right.
like,
Right. I haven't got. So
okay,
tell me
I
your
was like,
interpretation then.
I like the way you described it makes a ton of sense, and so like
Yes.
I'm now real like because I have a full page of notes just about this opening sequence
Yeah.
because like
Say more.
so as you guys might recall, like at the end of the last one, like Kris gets up in the middle of the night,
Right.
pulls out their heart and throws it in the cage. There's blood on the floor, and kind of like that's kind of your big cliffhanger ending.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're watching this, it's like you start with this black screen. There's the knife. There's the mom, and then the mom seems to be worried about pie. And I was like, the way I took all of this was not that this was like a tongue in cheek pickup, but like there's something happening to reality, is how I was taking this. It was like, oh,
Mm.
this is not like a real thing. Like this pie thing is not what's real here. Like there's some, like, I don't know,
So
but
wait. Oh, dang. I didn't even think of that. So are you thinking that the entirety of essentially home, that neighborhood, your hometown, is not real? Is that what you're thinking?
I think there's like a reality manipulation thing is
Oh.
like my take at this point,
Yeah.
because like she says like, do I need to lock the oven again? And so this is after we know this is about pie. But to
Yeah.
say, do I need to lock the oven again? You see the blood splatter on the ground next to the cage, which we now know is blood splatter. And
Right.
I was just like, this is to me like a suicidal ideation thing that is happening here, or like some
Ooh.
extreme thing that has happened with Kris historically, which is why
Yes.
like a lot of stuff has been pulled out of their room.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, like I saw this thing about the pie and I was like, this is not either not real, or it is the mom, Toriel, maybe it's not the mom, I'm not sure, but it's Toriel saying, um I don't know how to deal with this. And so I'm
Mm.
masquerading and pretending that this is about pie. And that's why I'm locking the oven. And that's why, like, whatever. So, like,
Ah.
the idea that it was no, literally, this is a joke about cliffhangers and I'm referencing a pie because you have a knife did not even cross my mind.
Well, okay, so I do think it really happened,
Okay.
but, and I think, I guess, knowing what we know at the end, I
Mm-hmm.
think intentionally, or at the start, we're intended to think about it as like oh, haha, we were worried for nothing. What's really going on with Kris and this knife? But I
Mm-hmm.
do think there is something happening. I totally did not make a connection between like potential like self-harm or suicidal ideation. And that's why like Toriel is manipulating stuff for Kris. So
Mm.
that's a really, really interesting theory that I had not thought about. For me, I was thinking more of jumping ahead.
Yeah.
We already discussed like Kris and us as the player are in contention with one another. And we see this throughout the game. Like Kris and the player don't necessarily like, sometimes when we choose things, like Kris doesn't really let that choice happen. The idea of the player manipulating Kris is something that I think is a big theme throughout this game thus far. And so in my head, I was thinking like all of this behavior from Kris is somehow trying to restrict whatever control we may have, or
Oh.
potentially, because I think in this game, and this is jumping ahead again, we'll like cycle
Mhm.
back, but like the knight is a character that I had completely forgotten about,
Same.
but gets brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something about Kris and the knight, and there's something there. I don't know if maybe we are the knight, if there's another character that's a knight. I don't think Kris themselves is the knight, but I think there's something to do with Kris agency and control, and this idea of Kris separating their heart and doing things when they are separated from their heart is like a big thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you, with your theory, it all kind of like aligns in a similar way of like Kris essentially has two states of being, one that we are more in control of and one that I think they are in control of. And
Interesting.
I will stop there because we can start rambling, but yeah.
Yeah, so this is really fascinating, and like I think as we get to the end, we'll need to revisit this one because
Yes.
there's a lot that happens at the end of this game, or this chapter of the game.
Oh yeah.
But I think structurally, the beginning of this game feels very similar. Of chapter 2 feels very similar to chapter 1. Like we're gonna go to school, we're gonna go into the classroom. We get a fantastic joke where they're reading a book and they're like,
Yeah.
"It's the best of times, it was the worst of times. Times are pretty good, times are pretty bad." It's like,
And it's Birdly delivering it, which makes it even more like it's just choice, honestly.
yes. And we'll need to come back to this because I did not pay Birdly any mind in these class sections, and it came back to bite me in the ass. So what's I think one of the things that's fascinating is like I think you brought this up last time is the like, was it all just a dream problem of the end of chapter 1? And we kind of open up once we're in the school talking with Susie, and Susie's like, it wasn't just a dream, right? Like we both
Mm-hmm.
remember this, and like that uncertainty I thought was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
uh you kind of go back to check on the closet to see if your trip to the dark world is still there.
Right.
And there's a line of dialogue that I wrote that I thought was it made my heart feel warm.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm excited to hear
Okay.
it.
Susie says something like, if we open this and there's nothing inside, will we still be ... And I was thinking like,
Yeah.
will we still be friends or
Yep.
something?
Mm-hmm.
That got me. That was like,
Same.
oh.
I love Susie. Like I would absolutely just die for Susie. I think out of all the characters, she might be my personal favorite in this game. She she's just so charming, and I think this opportunity that she's gotten through chapter 1 to like finally feel connected to someone in her classroom, and like like to feel that hope that like I hope this continues and it wasn't just for this like one thing that we both
Mm-hmm.
experienced together. That was super, like, yeah, like you said, heartwarming, relatable, vulnerable. I love seeing this softer side of her like come out.
Agreed. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because like about this moment,
Mm-hmm.
a new bond starts to form.
Mm-hmm.
We get Noelle, who's maybe like a reindeer.
Yeah,
Um,
definite Christmas themed
Definite Christmas
character here.
themed. Comes in and invites Susie, well, both of you, but specifically
Mm-hmm.
Susie, to the library to like work on a group project.
Yeah.
And it like again a very cute and sweet moment.
Yeah.
But I'll admit I was a little confused because I got vibes in chapter 1 that Noelle was kind of interested in Kris. Like
Mm-hmm.
she's kind of stuttering and stammering a little bit, like
Yeah.
nervous to invite Kris to join the group.
Well,
am I making this up? I don't know.
no, I didn't necessarily get like crush vibes from Noelle, but I did get like there is something there with their relationship, and we
Mhm.
do learn about that later
Right.
in this game. But yeah, I didn't personally get like crush vibes from Noelle in chapter 1, but I could see it being interpreted as that too.
Who's to say?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think especially with what we learn later, like the door is left open, like maybe there was some sort of crush like back in the day, and
Mm.
then like because they've been childhood friends, and then now she's doesn't have a crush anymore and is crushed on Susie. That's more of my interpretation, but yeah, there's definitely history between Noelle and Kris
Absolutely.
for sure. But instead of going to the library, Susie's like, no, we got things to do.
We gotta check
um,
out the closet.
we got to go and check out the closet. And so we jump in and we get this incredible transformation, little like animation. I think is so
Yes,
good.
it was so cool.
Oh, and you're back. So it is like, again, this idea of it being a dream. I originally said it because I was like, oh, they seem to like play on this trope, but I didn't feel like it was. And then, these characters are talking about it. And later at the end, it comes back in a way that I did not remember it and I totally forgot because it's been so long since I played. And so it's interesting thinking about the fact that like they were able to just go into the closet, immediately jump in and be like, we're here in
We're
the
here.
dark world. um,
It was like
so
unexpected, to be honest. I was expecting more
yeah.
of the Narnia moment where it's like, oh, the wardrobe doesn't open anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like that it subverted that expectation. That was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It also kind of makes me wonder again, especially with your question of like, I think I assumed the dark world was fantasy in the sense of like it is the fantastical world parallel to like the quote real world.
Mm.
But now I'm like, how real is the real world that we're in? I don't know if that's too meta, but I think that's something that I'll just kind of keep in the back of my mind as we anticipate chapter 3, because I think what you mentioned about that opener, it's gotten me thinking now. So yeah.
I agree. And I think, it's interesting because like we go to the dark world and we're going to like start
Mm-hmm.
reconnecting with Ralsei and team. And like one of the first things you have to do is go retrieve the people from chapter 1, and you go into a different room. You go back to the school, you go into a different room like in the school, you grab all the junk that was in the supply closet last time, you
Yeah.
put in a big ball, you bring it back to the dark world, and that is what populates the dark world with people again.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of like what is real is, and it's Kris that does it,
Yeah.
it is messing with me at this point. Like,
Yes.
what does it mean for the dark world to not be populated because all of the like residents, like Toy Story-esque, are in a different classroom?
Mm-hmm. Which again, it goes back into this idea of like, at least, putting aside what is the real world.
Sure.
um the dark world really continues to channel this idea of like play pretend when you're kids. Like I feel so much of how like my friends and I would play pretend as like when we were in elementary school, especially. Like this feels like an extension of that, even
Yeah.
more so continuing to chapter 2. So yeah, I think that's super fun to think about, and I'm really excited to see how these worlds continue to evolve.
So, what are some of the things that stood out to you in this section where you're like revisiting Dark World from chapter 1? Because there are a couple big things that stood out to me.
Yeah, so I mean, I loved getting to see all the characters that we interacted with from chapter 1. It was just really, it's like I'm a sucker for those moments, especially at the end of the game, and now we got it at the beginning where it's like, oh, here are all my friends, let's go and talk to them and say
Yeah.
hi.
Yeah.
I love it. I wish every game had moments like that. I think the biggest thing for me, you kind of go around, you have a lot of really whimsical chats. There are two things that stood out. The first is getting to see the king, Lancer's dad from
Mm-hmm.
chapter 1. I did not, I don't know why, but I never really thought about him being a hamster, but
At all. Yeah,
Yeah.
that got me.
And it's interesting because his prison, because they have him in prison essentially and kind of sequestered away because he's like, I'm still going to be evil, haha. And they're like, okay, well, then please sit in this room because we don't want you to be evil with everyone.
Yep.
But he's like, he's got like a hamster water bottle and a hamster wheel. And I was like, oh my God, he's a hamster, which now that I'm thinking out loud, like the hamster from the
A
classroom.
lot of classrooms have
Classrooms.
hamsters. Oh my God. I totally didn't connect that dot until right now.
Yeah, same. And just saying it out loud, I was like, oh my God. Um, but I think there was a really interesting little moment where he's not redeemed per se, but you get this glimmer of him caring about his son in sort of his own way, where he's like, oh, is my son happy? Which I think is that's a very specific word to use, an interesting question to ask. And again, I don't think it necessarily redeems him, but it shows a side of his character that we didn't get in chapter 1, which I thought was
Mm-hmm.
kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And Susie was kind of like, you threatened to throw him off a cliff. And he's like, well, I guess I took that too far, but also he would have bounced because he's my
Yeah.
bouncy little pumpkin or
My
something.
bouncy little pumpkin. Yeah, that was so sweet.
I was like, oh my God. So even this villain I thought was like not as
Mm-hmm.
villainous. Which again kind of fits with like childhood, like it feels like a
Childhood villain.
childhood villain.
Yeah.
Um, I have another thing, but I want to hear what stood out to you in this part as well, because I have a feeling it's
the
probably
the thing that stood out to me more than anything else was Ralsei has set up bedrooms for
yes.
you and Susie. And when
Mm-hmm.
you go into Kris's room, it has all of the trophies and stuff that are above
Mm-hmm.
Kris's brother's bed in the quote real world are now on their side of the room. And the other side is just completely like empty and dark.
Yep.
What is happening? Like you speculated last time that maybe Ralsei is somehow representative of the brother
Yeah, I don't know,
goat
because again,
people.
yeah, Ralsei is an anagram of Asriel, and for folks who have played Undertale, Asriel was like the adopted brother of a character in the game, which looks like Kris. So there's a lot of like nothing is solid, but there's it's like the LaCroix of whiffs of something happening, like there's something there and I don't know exactly what. But I think for me, this room really represented maybe like what Kris wishes of their life potentially, because again, this is supposed to be like the fun adventure world where they have their friends and they defeated evil, and like
Yep.
um this is the ideal world where Kris has a room where they are decorated and they're seen as like their own person and not tied to their brother in a way. So yeah.
Fully agreed. And again, I just got to keep coming back to like what is going on here. There's a bigger story, and like I'm very
Mm-hmm.
invested in that story.
Mm-hmm. um Susie's room.
The
So
spiky
good.
bed, it's the
The
like
spiky
pastel
clothes.
goth like to a T. Love it.
Honestly. And I think there's a line where Susie says like there's an ellipses like dot 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 my own room, huh? And it just that kind of like made it was like a bittersweet moment. I felt a little sad for Susie because I'm like, if you're excited but for your own room, uh it just makes me wonder about home life and like what you've been going through. And to have a friend that like took the care to set up a room with things you like that meant a lot to Susie, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was a very sweet scene.
Well, and it was also like again, like we'll get to the end, but like there are a couple of moments in this game that really make you
Mm-hmm.
question what's going on in Susie's home life, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, there's like some serious themes happening here that I'm really curious to learn more about.
Mm-hmm. um you also see Lancer. We cannot forget best boy Lancer.
Lancer's room, when you open the door, makes the sound of like you've stepped in something sticky and you're lifting your shoe up, that
Yep.
sound. And it was like the grossest and most perfect sound effect for entering his room that I could imagine.
Yeah, and it's like full of holes and yeah, weird splat sound effects, and it's just perfectly Lancer. So that was great.
Agreed.
Yep.
Agreed. I feel like not a ton happens maybe beyond that here, like
No.
except like you're about to go back to the real world,
Mm-hmm.
and uh Lancer and Raux, I don't know how to say their
Rules.
name.
Rules
Rules.
card, or what is it?
Rules, that's right,
Yeah.
rules card. Um like shrink themselves down so that they can come with you, which was very funny and
Yes.
like a very cute way to make sure that they get to join you on this next adventure.
Yeah, I love that like Lancer joins you and you're like fine with it, and then Rules joins you and it's like it says something like even though you didn't want them to or something like that. It's
Yep.
very good.
Yeah.
One mechanical note that we do get in this before we move into the next area, Ralsei explains to us basically that as we go through the world, we are essentially collecting darkners and bringing them to this sort of haven, this hub world, which I think is really interesting because, again, because I'm comparing it to Undertale, it's like this shows that this is much more expansive than Undertale ever was.
Mm-hmm.
We never
Mm-hmm.
had a hub world. And the fact that, like, as we encounter different creatures in our exploration, Rousey also mentions we now can start essentially recruiting them, uh, which is a totally new thing to chapter two.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
the last thing I'll note is there's also a blacksmith equivalent in this game, and
Oh, right.
so what's really interesting is like this idea of continuity between the chapters and like actions now. Like I think in the chapter one, you there wasn't a huge specific stuff you could point to and be like, this is going to impact what the story is going to do.
Yeah.
This is where we start seeing that mechanically a little bit more obviously.
Yeah.
So just
Agreed.
wanted to highlight that.
So we do make our way out of Dark World and make
Uh-huh.
our way to the library to meet up with Noelle and Birdo. What's their name?
Birdley.
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 Birdley to work on our school project. But unfortunately, the
Darn.
computer lab is a, a washed in darkness, and oh shucks, like you can just tell that Susie and Kris are absolutely heartbroken that they have to jump in and go on another adventure.
Dang. Yeah, I guess we can't do that group project anymore.
So you kind of almost immediately watch Noelle get captured by some sort of technology something.
Yeah.
Um, and you get introduced to a character that I think might have, as of for me, as of this moment, the best villain theme music. It's like Sephiroth level good in my estimation. We get introduced to the Queen, who is like this computer personified baddie. Uh,
Baddie
that
for real.
baddie for real,
Oh
like
man.
who is going to try and capture people and compel them to become her peons is kind of like her why,
Yeah.
so that she can go on a quest for world domination.
I love her. I love her so much.
I do too. There's something very like Powerpuff Girls to me about
Yes.
her character design. The like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, the like very long legs, or like maybe
She
Mom from
almost,
Dexter's Lab.
yeah, I was gonna say like Mom from Dexter's Lab, almost like she from Powerpuff Girls a
She,
little
that's what I was
bit.
trying to think of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Big
So
big she
good.
energy.
Yeah.
Um, one thing that's interesting is they use the word specifically assimilation, which I thought was an interesting
Yeah.
choice of words for that conversion
I
process.
screenshot that. Yeah.
Uh, and Ralsei then joins, and you all strike a killer pose together. It's like Ginyu Force
Yeah.
esque, very very good.
The team is reunited. Um, for me, I had a question at that point.
Hit it,
Because Rousey is of the other dark world
bring
area.
it, bring it.
And I was like, interesting. So the rules for all of the other characters that we've met thus far in chapter one, in like the tabletop dark world, um, does not apply to Rousey. And so I thought that was really interesting, and it got my wheels turning a little bit more on like, what is Rousey? Because I mean, at first I was like, you could write it off as, oh, but Rousey's the Prince of Darkness, so he can travel from world to world because this is all his realm. But I feel like there's a bit more to it than that. So that was one flag that I had at
Let's
that
just
point.
talk about this because I think this is like super interesting. Because throughout this game, like or this part of the game, you will eventually run into Rules card, and you will eventually run into Rousey. That like you've brought them along with you, and when you
Mm-hmm.
release them to participate with you in Chapter 2, over time they start getting petrified and turning into
Yes.
stone.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen to Rousey, who
Exactly. And Rowley
is
even says, like, oh, you can't. Rowley even explicitly is like, oh, darkners from other darkening worlds can't like exist for extended periods in outside of their realm.
mm-hmm.
What about you?
I think that furthers your like the theory you brought up that like there's some connection between Rousey and the brother.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else it could be at this point. And like to
Yeah.
me, it comes back again to like who's actually in charge of these worlds and
Mm-hmm.
what is going on here.
Yeah.
So a lot of this game unfolds very similarly to chapter 1. Like you're going to explore this world, you're going to make your way to a castle so that you can shut down the fountain and what have you. You're going to encounter the bad guys along the way. You're going to puzzle along the way. Your party is going to shift. People are going to like leave. You're going to be by yourself sometimes. You're going to have Noelle with you sometimes. You're going to have the other characters with you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There is a point that feels very incongruent to me in this chapter compared to the others. And I want to get your take on this.
Yes.
So, a big thematic or motif of both this game, Deltarune and Undertale, is the like non-violent pacifist route that like, hey, even in a video game, what if there were a way that you could be like completely a pacifist?
Mm-hmm.
But there are multiple points in this game where they drop a literal arcade machine into the scenery
Mm-hmm.
and you play a video game as these characters and you actually do have to fight in this video game. Like you're up
Mm-hmm.
against the queen or whatever, and it's like Mike Tyson's Punch Out kind of vibes, but like
Yeah.
you have to physically fight in the video game that we are playing.
Yes.
What does that mean, Jenny?
Yeah. I am so glad you pointed that out because I think initially you're like, oh, we're not fighting because we're just playing an arcade with the queen, you know? And it's like that first level of like, oh, no, this isn't actually a battle because we're doing this like video game. But really, when you start thinking about it, you're like, what?
But
It is
that's
the
the whole
same
point.
thing. That's the whole point. And so, yeah, I think I don't have like anything else other than I also noticed that. And I thought that was a really interesting way to again we go back to that idea of like your choices don't matter. You do not have maybe the agency, I forget exactly what the word, but it's like the thing is even though you're playing as a pacifist in this game, there are points in time where your choice to do that doesn't matter, it's disregarded. And I think that was a really cool sort of but yet subtle throwback to that because I don't think playing it the first time I didn't notice it, and playing it this time because I was thinking more about it because of Geeks and Grounds, I was like, oh, that's weird, we have to punch her, we have to fight in this
Yeah.
game. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
And like to be clear, I tried to not punch her. I went 3 full rounds of the battle getting it
Mm-hmm.
to draw, like getting the timer to run out. And then I played one time where I let myself lose. And then I looked online. I was like, no, you have to. It's the only way
Yeah.
to progress in the game. And it's just these folks are pulling some shenanigans here, and I don't know what they
Mm-hmm.
are, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, just to sort of go on this mini tangent of like points in the game when your choices don't matter, like another one that stood out to me was even when in one of the times when you're like sort of dividing up the team and sort of figuring out where to go, there's a point in which you can go with either Rousey or Susie. And I picked Susie because I was like, I want to walk with Susie. And Susie actually says, no, no, no. why does Kris get to
Why
pick
does Kris
everything?
get to pick? Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Rousey and you go by yourself. And Susie actually does that again in a battle where Susie's like, why does Kris get to do the act all the time? Like, I want to be able to do that. And Susie teaches herself and Rousey, who doesn't really want to learn, how
How
to
to
do
act.
an act. So again, this idea of like, as a player, the game making these choices and like
Yeah.
these characters making decisions without my input, uh, really, really
Here's
fun.
here's another one. One of the puzzles, like there's a thing that's blocking your way, and you have to use like a
Yeah.
keyboard to like get past and like puzzle your way through the keyboard. And you want it to say agree to all. So you have to find like the A and the G and the R and the E's, etc., to get it to say that. And once you do, and you successfully complete the puzzle, which is the only way to progress, Queen Internet comes by and is like, ha ha ha, you have agreed to all of our terms and services, which is like, what a perfect meta reference to us everyday civilians in real life agreeing to TOS. Like, I was like, this is brilliant. It's a perfect way to show that. And I didn't even connect the dot back to nothing that you do matters, but like, it was, you can't change anything about this world. Just like, that's right. Like, there was no way past this. Just like, we don't really have a choice when we agree to terms of service. Like,
exactly. And I think what's really interesting is, and I'm very fascinated to see how we continue to see this and the emotional tones that it takes, because I think this idea of, because this concept can easily fall into that like nihilistic frame of thinking, right? Because it's like, if none of your choices matter, or if you don't have a choice, what's the point? And I think you can think about it in that nihilistic way, but you can also think about it in a really freeing way where it's like, well, then it becomes more about it's everything everywhere all at once, whole metaphor. It's the journey, over destination kind of metaphor. It's all of that. And so I think it's really interesting because this chapter for me, more effectively than the first chapter, starts to show you what happens when your choices don't matter, and like pulls out a little bit more of that emotional connection. And I'm excited to see what happens next.
Fully agree.
So you did play pacifist this entire time?
Yeah.
Okay. I will say I also did it. I will put a link in the newsletter, and before the community hangout, I need to, and I think you should, read about the Snowgrave route, because through this journey, in Undertale, the choice that you got was like, basically, do you want to be completely aggressive, aggro? Colloquially, it's called the genocide route. I don't really like using that, frankly, especially right now. So I'm going to call it just like the aggro route. And you can be pacifist. Here, you have the opportunity to force specifically Noelle, like the other characters, but Noelle, to freeze and sort of destroy the enemies with her powers. And if you take that, it unlocks what people have called the Snowgrave or the Weird route. I have not played it. I'm just going to I'm going to watch it. I'll link it in the newsletter. I think you should, so that way we can see like what happens if we play it with a different sort of style. Because I think it may illuminate also more to that phrase of like, choices, do your choices matter? So yeah, just wanted to shout that out because I know both of us don't play with that style personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to read into that. It sounds fascinating. Speaking of like the implications of our choices, the duck that I built as like the like thrashing machine, like you keep seeing ducks in this game, and like I don't know what the inspiration for that is. I don't know if it's like, oh, this is all happening and you're in the bathtub and you're Kris and you have a rubber ducky with you and it's all in your imagination. I don't know what's going on here, but like something's happening with these ducks. Something's going on here. And while we're on the topic of ducks, I want to talk about Birdly, because I'm going to be completely transparent with you all. Like, and you all know that I commonly miss things until it's way later than what is appropriate. it was not until we got back to the real world and Birdly was there that I realized that the Birdly who's wearing like Falco's outfit from Star Fox is your classmate. The
Oh,
entire time,
no.
I did not realize that was the annoying kid from class that was like stepping all over you. Or maybe it was right before that. He has a monologue where he talks about the spelling bee with
Mhm.
Noelle. But like, I played 98% of chapter 2 without realizing that Birdly was your classmate from the real world, the quote real world.
That's kind of wonderful in a way because you're just like, oh, like what if you were the
Who is this
person
bird
who,
dude?
yeah, it's like, you were in class with me all along. That's really funny. What were your impressions and thoughts initially with Birdly, and did they change as you played?
I think Burley is very much the Minkus character from Boy Meets World.
Hmm.
For those of you who don't know, is like your goody two shoes, like I have all the right answers kind of
Mm.
kid. Like it just is Minkus, and I have a soft spot in my heart for Minkus,
Hmm.
and so I loved him. I loved him from beginning to end. I love that like not like Noelle is hiding from the queen, and then the queen starts hiding from
Oh,
Birdly. Like one of the funniest moments of the game is like you can't make a triple truce, like you're making truces with all the characters. I really liked Birdly as a character, but I don't know. Maybe if I had known all along that he was from your class, I would have felt differently. But I
yeah.
didn't know, and so I was like, "This dude's got a Falco super like Saiyan Scouter to judge power levels. I like it. I don't know what's going on, but I like it."
That's really funny. Yeah, I think that was also a favorite moment of mine because you have like Noelle who's hiding from the queen in this alley. The queen hopped over Noelle and is like straddling the walls of the alley to hide from Birdly. Yeah, the visuals are just like, which just as a general upgrade, the visuals between Undertale and Deltarune already an upgrade. Between chapter 1 and chapter 2, like there's so many more nuanced animations. Like they fixed up some of the sprites. It looks great. So I think the
I
visual
straight
humor
up
in this.
did not realize like when we see Ralsei for the first time in the Dark World at the very beginning of chapter 2,
Mhm.
I was like, who is that? Like I did not recognize them
Yeah.
because of how like cleaned up their character design was.
Yeah. Looks really good. I
It
was like
does. It
I
looks
was
great.
super impressed.
Mm.
Um yeah, Birdley to me was interesting. I think I do have a soft spot for him knowing what we know by the end of the game, knowing that he's a very keeping in mind these are kids, they're in school, so they're
Yeah.
like high schooler,
Right.
maybe middle schooler, probably high schooler. So in my head I'm like, this is a kid who is really insecure, really trying to cover a lot of that up by being really bombastic in how he acts with others, which comes it's obnoxious. He is
Mm-hmm.
very annoying. um Admittedly, when we first really start seeing him in cyber world and cyber city, I was really apprehensive because I'm like, honestly, this is the kind of kid, this is the kind of guy who very easily could turn right wing. And I'm like, you
Incel
feel,
vibes.
yeah, you have the feeling of someone who is on the precipice, who if provided like guidance, kindness, and like people who are willing to like tell you when you're not doing things like correctly, or if you're who are willing to tell you you're being an asshole, and you can take that feedback, I can see you swinging like in a great direction as you grow up and you learn from
Mm-hmm.
your mistakes. I can also very easily see you get just into the dregs of society and like
Mm.
being the absolute worst as an adult. And so what I was really happy about was by the end of chapter 2, you see even like there's a moment where Susie is like even giving this sort of like inspirational talk, and Susie's like, god, I wish Ralsei was here to do this. But like even Susie is giving Birdley this opportunity, and I think for me Birdley represents that like teenager who is online and sees all this stuff, and you just hope that he has people in his life to tell him like straight up when he's being a jerk and when he needs to check himself and when he's doing great. So Birdley, I think, is a at first I was like, oh, you're just kind of annoying. and he got more interesting to me as the game went on.
So yeah, I think, before we get to like the end game and like getting back to the real world and whatever else, like what were some of the other big moments that like struck you while we're in Cyber City?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, there are so many, and my Steam Deck is about to die.
Steam Deck is about to die.
It is. I will say, while at times they did kind of drag a little bit, I did enjoy a lot of the additional ways we could interact in the mini games and things. Overall, I think it was a great expansion and showcase for like what the team can do, and it was really fun. I think the city as a whole is really fascinating to me because it did feel like being on the back end, like a fantastical back end of the internet. Particularly the interactions we had around Spamton. And like in the city, there's even like an ad area where like Addison, I think is the character's name, and there's like a bunch of pop-ups. I'm curious, just in interacting with Spamton, what you thought about that character. Just in general.
To me, that was fat I would have trimmed. Like I went through that whole section as quickly as possible. I was just like, get me to the fountain, get me to like, why am I doing this? So yeah, I did not really sink my teeth into that, to be honest.
A little bit, just because I've been told this by people who have played this part of the game. This is another aspect that I'm going to try and get, because I created a save file, because the arrow key character who's like, I'm looking for the blue check marks. Did you get the blue check marks and everything?
The blue check marks.
Yeah. So there's a side quest featuring Spamton. And in chapter 1, there's a secret boss, which I did not do. I'm going to see if I have time, I'm going to maybe try and do that too. But chapter 2 also has a secret boss, which is, spoilers, Spamton Neo. One of the things that was done in chapter 1 was that secret boss, I think, foreshadowed some of the stuff that we got in chapter 2. And so I want to do the Spamton Neo because I think that's going to foreshadow some of what we're going to see in chapter 3. Spamton also is just a really fascinating character to me because he is like everything wrong with the internet in a lot of ways. I don't know how to put it.
Agreed fully.
And I think he feels like a very tragic character as well. He talks about like his friends like left him, he's in a bunch of debt, like he has this really tragic story, and I think, and he's very clearly not well. Like he's not doing great. So I think I'm excited to play and talk about, when we have the community hangout, what happens in that Spamton Neo battle, and like if there's extra stuff there, because I think it feels like filler, but then for the folks who like go in for like all the extra content, there's like stuff for chapter 3 in that, if I'm understanding what my friends have told me.
Interesting.
Yeah. But other than that, sorry, go ahead.
I will say, like, just to kind of talk through like kind of the big boss battle with the queen, like, it's kind of this big mech battle. She gets in a mech, you assemble all of your friends into a mech. I thought was very fun. And looked very cool. I loved the like Sailor Moon transformation of them getting into stool form again, which was a fantastic callback.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me is after you've kind of won the battle and you're talking with the queen and Ralsei is there, you get a really interesting kind of cinematic where you learn more about why we have to shut these fountains down, and that these titans are going to be there if we don't, and they're going to destroy the world. And the queen is like, wait, what? That's what happens with these fountains? I didn't know that. I don't want the world to end. I want to rule the world. Like, this is not in line with my goals. And I thought, like, again, like very funny, tongue in cheek, but also like really ominous. And the fact that Ralsei knows this and that we don't really have a lot of insights into like what's happening in this world is just like, I don't know. There's just like a lot of curiosity for me around that.
I think it's funny to me that Ralsei knows all these prophetic things and like isn't telling us everything up front.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's malicious, but it is suspicious.
Ooh, I like that. Should be a t-shirt.
Yeah. Not malicious, but suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
I also agree. This kind of hit me the same way last time, where it's like there's this knight that the queen is like, the knight just like mentioned this. And I'm like, who is the knight? We need to figure out like this pivot point, this character that seems to be making all of this happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we know nothing about, and Rousey's never mentioned the knight, which I think is also a very weird thing to omit if you know all of this prophecy around what's going on. So yeah, I think just lots of really good meat to chew on as they get ready to go back to the real world.
Shall we talk end game? Shall we talk like what happens when we go back?
Yes. So they all go back. What I feel is very interesting is not everyone remembers what happens as a reality.
Mm-hmm.
Noelle specifically is like, oh, what a dream, you know. And there was, so again, it goes back to this weird element of like it was all a dream, but also it's weird that Birdley and Noelle seem to not be remembering things in the way that Susie and Kris are remembering things. So very, very odd that. You have the opportunity to explore the neighborhood, which is great. You get lots of callbacks and you get to see characters. What I love is that Kris invites Susie to spend the night, which I'm just like, best friends. So cute.
Wait, was it
Well,
Kris
no,
that
sorry.
invited Susie?
Toriel invites Susie to spend the night.
So let
Um,
yeah, this is like a really interesting point. And like for me,
yeah.
the most important experience of the whole second chapter. Like you go back to your
Mm-hmm.
house with Susie
Yep.
and Toriel is there, and you can tell one, something is not right.
Mm-hmm.
Two, that Toriel is incredibly glad that Susie is there, does not want her to leave, uh,
Mm-hmm.
wants her to help make pies, wants her to stay overnight. And there's like kind of an ominous tone to all of this to me.
Yes.
And like, in game things that happen, right? Like you go into Kris goes into the bathroom, turns on the faucet, and pulls out their heart, throws it underneath the sink, and then escapes out of the window. And you hear Toriel talking, and she's like, oh, sometimes Kris just kind of disappears like this and goes in the bathroom for a long time, like whatever. And which feels like denial heavy. I know something's wrong, but I can't really do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
You come back and join up, and like, you're staying overnight, and no one really addresses where you went. You're falling asleep watching TV. Toriel comes in and calls the police and is like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I think there was a prowler out here that like slashed my tires. And you get the sense Toriel sits in a chair, is like Toriel's staying up with the kids. It was going to like watch them during
Yeah.
this sleepover. Again, very ominous moment. And eventually the TV turns to static. Toriel's asleep. Susie's asleep. Kris gets up, pulls out their heart again, as far as I could tell, and then starts stabs the floor with the knife. And what seems to be a fountain-esque degree of black smoke starts filling the house. And that's how we end chapter 2.
Yep.
Everything about this sequence to me screams, I am the parent of a child who self-harms, and I am doing everything I can to create like implicit guardrails and safety for my child, but I do not know what to do. So that to me is like the underlying thing that like is how I'm interpreting this entire section of the game. And like, did something happen to the brother? Was it Kris that did it? Does Toriel know that it was Kris that did it? Or did something happen within this world and Toriel's a victim of it? Like, it just feels like there is an unexplored thing here that
Yeah.
feels really poignant to me.
Yes. I had not thought about that until you brought it up at the very beginning, making that connection with like the pie tin and the knife. And so I really, really like this theory that you're going with in terms of like what is Kris's story in this? Um and like where like how does the relationship between Toriel and Kris really play into what we're seeing as this larger story unfolding? um I think that's really, really fascinating. And again, I really appreciate it because I hadn't seen it in that perspective, because most of my focus has been on like what are these a little bit more literal on the story, like what are these dark worlds representing, what are we trying to explore as we go into these different spaces. So yeah, I really appreciate that because I think that is a really good thread to like hold in our minds as we anticipate chapter 3. One thing about Toriel and this world that we have not touched on at all, and I don't know where this will go or if it goes anywhere, but there is a lot of like, there are mentions of faith and religion throughout this, and like really like a lot of the uh not subtext, but what is it called? Like when you interact with objects, like in the house, for example, I think there's like Toriel seems to be religious.
Hmm.
And I need to, I forget, I
I
think
think
there's
I
like a
might have
book
missed
that
some
you
of that.
can, yeah, I think you can see there's like a book in the house somewhere that's like a religious book. And I think there's like a radio station. There are like a couple of points in which religion and faith seems to be mentioned and alludes to like Christianity, if I'm remembering
Hmm.
correctly. I'll go back and like look into this, but I feel like for me, one of the things that I was thinking about was like, again, this idea of escapism, not addressing like what you have in front of you. um, if you don't feel like you can control, and if you don't feel like your choices matter, what are you using to then feel like you have control? And I think this idea of like, some people use like escaping into play, like board
Mm.
games. Some people use the internet. It seems like that's like that media is in a form of escape. Like Toriel, I wonder if we're going to get like elements of faith being her way to cope but not effectively interact with Kris, for example. Again, that it's like the lightest of breadcrumbs, but I feel like Toriel and religion seem to have intersected in my notes and thinking in this game, like mental notes.
That's interesting.
um
My first thought is like
mhm.
the reason we can't control anything in this world and make choices is because Kris is God and Kris is making all the choices.
So what do you think happens to Kris then when they take out their heart?
Maybe that's like going into God mode. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have the specifics down, but like, I am convinced that like Kris is the ultimate arbiter of what is happening in this story. And I love what you
Mm.
just said about like, these are different types of games. We did like physical board games, like old school board games, and now we've moved forward to like computer games or computer online experiences. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's some, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know the
Yeah.
specifics, but like, I just feel like Kris is the arbiter of what is happening in these spaces.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Kris is the knight?
Yes,
All right.
for sure. I'm
For
on this
sure.
train. You're going to
Yeah.
have to convince me that they're not at this point.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. Do you have a prediction on like what the next setting would be?
Oh, until you brought up the board game versus online game, I hadn't really thought about it. What do you think? I'll try and think about it while you're.
Um, hmm. I guess, okay, assuming that the thing that we saw was like a dark fountain opening up and it's in their house, like it was like in the living room with the TV. So maybe
Mhm.
we're going into like visual, like TV
TV world.
worlds, maybe.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I feel like, again, I think this seems to be the trend of like, what are the things that people escape into? And TV is one of them. So I think maybe we're going to get like a TV or movie themed world next.
I like that a lot. It makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense.
Yeah. Any last sort of concluding thoughts as we wind up today's episode, wind up our time with Deltarune?
I'm ready for chapter 3. Let's go, baby.
I know. Chapter 3 and 4 are, I'm reading the wiki right now. I pulled it up because I was like, I want to make sure 3 and 4 are content complete and they're expected to come out next year for sure. So
3 and 4?
3
Okay,
and 4.
let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. I'm
So
pumped.
maybe we'll have a continuation there.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, before we wind down, quick housekeeping. Just as a reminder, our our monthly hangout is happening a week sooner than normal because of the holidays. So Saturday, the 21st of December in Discord. Super excited. Come ready to talk about Deltarune, maybe your end of the year game picks. That is what we'll be talking about on next week's podcast. Next week's podcast is the last of the year. We're going to talk about our personal top 10s of the year. It'll just because we play a lot of games that aren't just released in 2024, we'll be talking about both games that we loved from 2024, but also just the games we played in general. Because sometimes, it's good to revisit stuff and talk about and celebrate things, even if they're not from this year.
Yeah.
And we'll also be revealing the community selections, and I'm hoping if I can get my act together, basically the first few months of Geeks and Grounds next year, so you can start planning, preparing, buying things that hopefully it will be on sale in the holidays.
Very fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining us here at Geeks and Grounds. If your mom's making you a pie, just eat the ding dang thing. Don't pull your heart out about it.
Yeah. Especially if it's cinnamon butterscotch pie.
There we go. Oh, I remember that.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Hey,
bye. See you next time. The Geeks and Grounds podcast is produced and edited by me, Jenny Wyndham. The logo is designed by Lee Thomas, and today's intro-outro music is the title, A Cyber's World, with a question mark and an exclamation point, by Toby Fox from the Deltarune Chapter 2 original soundtrack. In addition to finding episodes across YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, you can hang out with us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Geeks and Grounds, and reach out to us with questions, comments, thoughts, or feedback via our website at geeksandgrounds.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.